Give me 1 second. Okay, George, does that look right?
That's good.
Okay. Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session on cultivating more inclusive and engaging classrooms with voice thread assignments. So I'm Jamie Abrams, and I'm based at the Law School at American University's Washington College of Law. I'm in the process of publishing a book with the University of California Press about inclusive Socratic teaching, and have published about this particular topic about using voice-based assignments in class before. And I'm joined by a colleague, George Haynes. George, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sorry. So I'm the instructional designer and online educator at VoiceThread. I used to work in a K-12 environment, and I also worked in higher ed, and I've been teaching online for probably about 10, 15 years by this point.
Great. I think it's a fun little fact that George and I actually don't know each other. We got put together because I wanted to present on the pedagogy of using these tools, and George is the expert on the product that I'm describing. So, but notably, I don't work for VoiceThread. I came into this through my own teaching goals and came to use the product and enjoy it. And so we've brought in a proper expert to teach how to use the tool. And I'll sort of start by setting up a pedagogical frame for why I think these tools can help in all of our classrooms. So our session outcomes, we're hoping by the end of this session that you'll be able to articulate how voice and video-based assignments might strengthen student inclusion and engagement in a traditional classroom, that you might be able to take steps to create a voice thread assignment or know where to go for further support if you're interested in trying an assignment like this. Notably, I should say at the outset that VoiceThread is something that integrates into our Canvas pages, our campus learning management system. And you might be able to think about how a voice thread assignment can add more depth and more student engagement to something you're already doing in class. So I want you to think about this session as something that can tweak something you already do, not something totally different. So with my time, I'm going to introduce, get us talking a little bit about some of the critiques of existing pedagogies. Particularly, I'm thinking here about the large lecture hall, the sort of Q&A kind of engaged lecture dynamic. Then we'll introduce what voice-based tools are. We're particularly going to focus on VoiceThread, but I'll spotlight briefly some other options. Then we'll talk in an applied way about how some of these tools can map onto your existing course and your existing materials, and how these tools might respond to some of those critiques that we identified. So the first thing I'd love to do, maybe in the chat, we could get some folks, let's just start to brainstorm. What are some critiques when we walk in and we stand in this lecture class, the large, I kind of have a little bit of a picture there of what it might look like. But when we walk into a classroom like that, what are some critiques about those more traditional classrooms where we're up at the podium? What are some critiques about how that technique works, how we engage students, challenges that we face engaging students? So maybe in the chat, folks could offer keywords or things that they struggle with. I'll give everyone a second to participate there. Well, the first example would be the awkward pause when you ask a question. That's one huge issue, right? You prepare interactive pieces and you kick them off to an audience, to your class, and you wait, right? And there's a question of how long we wait. How long do we wait? There's that one hand that goes up right away. How long do we wait? Good. Laura kicks us off. Thank you, Laura. And says that there's students who are more outgoing. They're more willing to speak. Like, in a cynical way, we might call them gunners, but they also might be our go-to students. They're the first ones who are going to participate, and they're reliable. Good. And other folks, for various reasons, might be more shy, might take longer. They might have a longer sort of cognitive bandwidth before they're able to get their thoughts formulated and are comfortable participating. Ronald offers an important critique and says, in a pragmatic sense, lecture's just more efficient. Once we open up an exercise, it's much harder to figure out how much content we can get through. It's efficient, but it's hard to keep students engaged for that full length of time. Less engaging, not as interactive. We lost a participant there. So some critiques, I'll offer a few more, maybe even a few more, even more critical than those offered already by our participants. A classroom like this, a large traditional classroom, tends to be professor centered, right? The visual, like if you just look at the design, the architecture of this classroom, the acoustics of the classroom, everything about it is set up to position the professor as the center of the classroom and the students as subordinate. And with that comes power, right? So the professor holds the power. They're the ones driving the timing, driving the discussion, figuring out when to move, when to pivot to the next person. And participation, even if we can imagine a robust form of participation, hands are flying up, things are moving, it's still going to happen in a serial way. Oftentimes, unless we can break into a group assignment, but in terms of students using their voice, putting out their identity and really engaging with the class, it's often going to be one student at a time. And then, as noted in the critiques in the chat, often quite inconsistent. So we have some students who might go all semester without participating actively and orally. And we might have other students who really dominate the class, where students so much so that students even start to check out when they raise their hands. The effects of these kinds of more traditional teaching techniques are notable too, and we can't ignore them when we think about the pedagogical goal of building an inclusive classroom. So these traditional pedagogies can marginalize some students, so that sort of dominance that it takes to throw that hand up in the air and have that self-assuredness that you're ready to shout your answer out and put your views out there to the class might lean toward a certain type of student, might marginalize a certain student. And there's plenty of literature suggesting that in classrooms like this, that it might marginalize students of color, women students, non-traditional students. These pedagogies can also be somewhat disempowering because of that professor-student dynamic. They can be disengaging. We just sort of move into this passive mode where we take notes and just get out of the lecture. But also, and I think more interesting today, as we think about how we return from sort of pandemic teaching, there's also a notable disconnect between the study and the practice. So for me, I teach in the law school. And so if we think about what we would want a lawyer to be able to do, I'm not sure we want to hire the lawyer who just stands up first and says the first thing out of their mouth, right? You might want the reflective lawyer who puts their thoughts together, thinks about them before they speak. And so there's a sort of disconnect in the kinds of things that we reward. So many professors try to manage this. There's lots of literature out there about how to manage the classroom voices in ways that are equitable. Some people will do on calls, will just assign people, put people in groups, put people in teams, or call on people proactively, trying to get more of sort of diversity and engagement and a more robust conversation going. But there's often still differences in the quantity of participation and a real reward for a certain type of participation. And so there's a famous book in the law literature published by Lani Guinier, a civil rights pioneer from Harvard University, and it was called Becoming Gentlemen. And in it, she sort of describes what it takes to become a participant in a law school classroom. And she describes how students have to sort of take on this different identity and play this sort of assured dominant male role in that kind of participation. And she urges us to redesign our classrooms to think more inclusively. So that's what we want to do with our time today, is think about how voice-based tools can cultivate an inclusive class participation. And so just as a quick little preview, we're going to spend our time together today talking about VoiceThread as the tool. But I have listed here, you could screenshot if you were interested in shopping around. There are plenty of other products out there. VoiceThread's a good fit if you're on campus at American University because it is embedded in our learning management software, Canvas. And so we have more support for that. Some of these other ones can be a little bit childish. can be easy to use, but a little childish in their first appearances. So VoiceThread has a nice academic look to it too. So I have used that in my teaching, and I've even used it when it's not on the learning management platform. So let me stop there and let's get some meat to this. So we're sort of talking about these voice-based tools. Let's see one, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how to apply these techniques in a classroom.
Sorry, I just had to unmute there. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And thank you for that great intro, Jamie. I think that was really helpful to kind of frame everything, right? And we always want to make sure that we're not kind of getting comfortable with the most efficient way to do things at the expense of learning, right? And sometimes we think of things in terms of, I have this amount of material to get through, I have to cover this amount of material over the course of the semester, so I just want to say it, and we don't really know whether or not it's landing anywhere, whether the students are absorbing it. And VoiceThread allows for a lot of the affordances that you talked about, where it's not a serial activity, it's an asynchronous tool, right? So just to give you a definition for VoiceThread, from a technical perspective, a VoiceThread is an asynchronous multimedia slideshow that allows you to have a discussion with your students on any slides that you like. From a more conceptual standpoint, and I think this is the big takeaway from what I want to say today, is that VoiceThread is a virtual classroom. So whatever you do in a face-to-face classroom, you can do on VoiceThread. And that does include lecture, right? So especially in the beginning of the semester or in the beginning of the class, it's really hard to find a way around giving people information. If you want to have a good discussion, if you want to have them be engaged and thinking and exchanging ideas, you need to have something for them to dig into. So there's usually more kind of a broadcast. There's more of an information dump early on in the semester and early on in the class. And the same thing, you can use those same kind of approaches with VoiceThread. So this first example that I want to show you is just a standard lecture. This is just kind of to show you the bridge from what you do in a classroom to what you can do on VoiceThread. Now, to create a VoiceThread, all you have to do is upload whatever you want to have as your slide content. That could be PowerPoint, it could be images, video files, documents, whatever you want. You can upload them all. You can have a mix of media, and then you record what you want to say. So here's an example from a business law class. Keep in mind, this could be any subject, right? This could be sociology, education, women's studies, whatever it is. This is a business law class, and this instructor uploaded a PowerPoint presentation, and he's going to deliver his lecture.
Welcome to our VoiceThread on legal opinions. The legal opinions are not written primarily for the purpose of telling a lay audience a story about a case in the way that I typically do in class. The legal opinion itself, the case text, is written to teach a professional audience how the law will apply. Because there's a very different task from, say, a novel, there's a very different structure than a novel would have. And the point of this VoiceThread module is to learn about that structure.
All right, so I'm going to pause him there. But just like in a face-to-face class, if students had questions, they would raise their hand. On VoiceThread, they would come down here and click on this plus sign and record them. All right, so this VoiceThread is very simple, very easy to make. It doesn't have a lot of engagement on it because this is more of a broadcast. But once you have information, once the students have done some of the reading, they've listened to a lecture, now they're ready to start to dig into some of these ideas and debate and discuss. And you can see that on some of these other examples here. So this one is another fairly straightforward VoiceThread example. And this one, the instructor just recorded from her webcam. So it's fairly similar from an interface standpoint to what you would have in a Zoom session. But the big difference is that it's asynchronous. So it's not that kind of serial conversation where only one person can speak at a time. In this VoiceThread, she can record what she has to say. The students can listen to it. And as added benefits for students that may have auditory processing issues or students that may have various learning disabilities, they can go back and replay it, which you can't do in a live session, right? So on VoiceThread, everything is asynchronous, everything is recorded. It's fully accessible for all of the different types of students that need different accommodations. So they can listen to what the instructor had to say.
Hey guys, so this is the slide that you will use to respond to the first question related to telling me a.
All right, so she's going to get in here and prompt the students for a discussion. So she's not using this as a lecture tool, she's using this as a discussion tool. And you can see the students have recorded their comments on the left-hand side.
Okay, so for my story, I kind of wanted to talk about the transition into online classes because I had never taken an online class before. I was a freshman when COVID hit.
All right, so you can see the students can share their thoughts and they don't have to wait for somebody else. They can reflect on the question, take some time to come up with the best answer, and then engage. And here's the other real benefit. The instructor can then engage back. So my philosophy with education has always been that practice plus feedback equals learning, right? So the information part, the students don't necessarily need a teacher to give them information about a subject. We have books, there are videos, there's tons of information out there. What the students really need is for you to assess whether they know things and to give them feedback on how their progress is coming along, right? And steer them into different ways of thinking about things. Show them other perspectives. Use your expertise on the ground with them as opposed to from the stage, right? And that's what you can see the instructor is doing here, engaging with the students, offering feedback, giving formative assessment. All right, so throughout here.
Hey Brooke, such a great response for this. Adapting to new ways of learning was definitely.
All right, so you can see there are text comments, there are audio comments, there are webcam comments. All of these are available. VoiceThread is a multimodal type of activity. All right, now here's another one. This is one where you have different scenarios. So I'm always a big fan of storytelling, case studies, things like that in the classroom. And in this class, the teacher is talking about ethical issues, and she has a scenario here. Now, this is something else you can do on VoiceThread. You can just write on a slide. You can also have a video, right? Maybe there's a video of some ethical situation. You can upload that as a slide and have the students discuss that as well. So you can start off by kind of framing the discussion.
Ethical scenario 2. A researcher has put his materials together for his research study to apply to the IRB, including the application, survey instruments, recruitment materials, and submitted them for approval. He is feeling quite confident.
All right, and you can see how the students all participate.
Hello, on scenario 2, there's part of me that can kind of relate to this particular researcher who is just anxious to get started once you kind of know what you're doing. The problem is that you need.
Right, and once again, the instructor can engage back and give that feedback, that formative assessment, and establish that social presence that's so important in online courses.
Yeah, you raised many important issues in your comments. Certainly the IRB issue about he's really not allowed to recruit before he has IRB approval. But I think what was really interesting to me was also.
All right, so far I've shown you a simple lecture idea, a couple of discussions, and VoiceThread can be used to replace those text discussion boards that you might have. Few other examples that I want to show. Hold on one second. The Zoom is hiding on me. Let me move this over. All right. So this one is for a student project. A student was designing a mobile app for music, and the instructor is able to give her feedback right on the VoiceThread.
This is a screen that the conductor will see when he opens the app. When he opens the app, he sees his name displayed right here. He sees the.
All right, now you can see the student is using the doodle tool to annotate, and we'll show you how that looks and works in just a little bit. But I want to show you some more of the feedback here.
This is more of a comment just on the presentation itself. I think if you were to do, I think it's great so far. I think if you were to do another one, or even if you were to edit this one, instead of circling the button. So,
all right, so you can see how students can create content, share it with the instructors, share it with their class, and get feedback on it. You can also assess students in a variety of ways, whether it's just having a simple question on the slide and the students respond.
Hello, everyone. It's Henry again. This is such a fun way to use the doodle tool. I'm going to go for C. Yes, it's also green, and it stands out as the correct answer.
All right, so you can have any number of different types of assessments. Maybe you teach a business class and you want students to analyze charts and graphs about a startup company and why they had lower revenue in the fourth quarter than in the second quarter based on the case study that you read. Or you can have a video, maybe you teach language and you have a conversation that you found on YouTube of two people in a cafe in Madrid discussing, what they want to have for lunch. And you want to use that as a listening comprehension activity. So you upload the video or you import the video into VoiceThread and then ask the students questions. What did the guy say he wanted to have for lunch? And what was the problem that the woman brought up? Whatever it may be that you want to ask. All right, you can directly engage with students for oral exams. Here's another language example, but this could really be an example for any subject. This teacher teaches English as a second language. This could be a philosophy teacher asking students questions, right? All you're really seeing here is a teacher asking a question and the students answering. So in her case, she's doing this for listening comprehension. She's evaluating speaking ability, the ability to use vocabulary and grammar structures properly. But you could use this just to get information, asking students a question about macroeconomics or sociology or whatever it is that you might teach.
Where did you come from?
All right, so she's transported her oral exam from being something that she needs to schedule with each individual student to something that she can do with all of her students at once. And one of the benefits of VoiceThread, there's a feature that you can use called comment moderation, which makes all of the incoming comments to your VoiceThread hidden. So if you wanted to assess students and give them a grade, there is an assignment builder as part of the Canvas integration that Jamie had mentioned. But you can also turn on comment moderation so the students cannot see or hear each other's answers. But you, as the instructor, can see and hear all of them.
I come from Egypt. I come from Syria, but I'm living in the UAE.
Right, so you can see how she can evaluate their language skills, but she could have said to these students, I want you to speak for 2 minutes about the difference between Kant and Hume and their views on existentialism, right? Or whatever the topic may be in your philosophy class. You can have students create voice threads. They can create presentations. They can also create demonstrations. So whether you teach a music class and you want students to improvise, to a backing track in Lydian mode as part of your jazz guitar class, or students are giving a speech, maybe it's a drama, maybe you teach drama and you want the students to practice their soliloquy from Macbeth, or in this case, it's a nurse practitioner who's going to go through a head-to-toe exam. And as you're watching this, I'm just going to show you a few seconds of it, but as you're watching this, imagine if this teacher had tried to do this as a written exam, where she's telling the student, just list the steps of a head-to-toe exam, and then you read that the student has memorized those steps and you give them a 100 on the test, right? In this case, you can actually see them interacting. You can see how they're engaging with the patient, whether they're wearing gloves, all the things that you really want to see.
Hi, my name is Shante, and I'm a nurse practitioner student at Maryville University. Today, I will be performing my head-to-toe assessment on my volunteer, Deja. Before coming in, she emptied her bladder. She was offered a gown. Her height and weight were measured. A full set of vital signs were taken. We did her near and far vision testing with both the Rosenbaum and Snellen chart. I watched her gait while she walked in and everything was normal. And I washed my hands before entering the room.
And I do see a few folks talking about where to find VoiceThread in Canvas. I can certainly show you that later. There is documentation that I can send in the chat as well. I just wanted to show you one more example before turning it back to Jamie. And this one is one where an instructor asked the students to upload their paper. And she's going to review this paper just like she would if she were sitting in an office during office hours and the student had come over, across campus in the rain or the snow, whatever it may be, to get some feedback. She can give this student the same type of feedback they would get in that situation, rich, deep feedback. And I'm going to zoom in and just play a little bit of this so you can see what she's doing for the student.
Okay, you've attempted to talk about something really awesome here. Okay, but you are kind of losing me because you're not introducing this particular idea. So, this concept of the banking concept, failing to acknowledge men and women as historical beings. This is a really interesting twist in your argument, and what you need to do is put a quote in directly from the text and explain it so that you're introducing this idea.
All right, so you can see once again, she's using that doodle tool, and we'll show you how to create a voice thread in just a little bit, but she's using this like a red pen, you know, on a paper. So imagine the difference between this and kind of putting a sticky note in the margin, telling the student, add a paragraph, cite your source. That stuff's important, right? It's helpful, but it's not the same as sitting down and really digging into the paper with the student. And that's what VoiceThread does. It gives you that social presence that allows you to engage with the students. The student could click on the plus sign and ask follow-up questions, and you're off to the races, right? So those are just a few examples. There's any number of other ways to use VoiceThread, but I just want to show you a few of the assignment types, various demonstrations and kind of quizzes, ways to give students individual feedback on their projects. Class discussions is one of the major use cases. And then you can always do kind of more of the standard lecture type of activity as well. All right, Jamie. So I'm going to pass it back to you.
Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the pedagogical benefits. So now that we can all sort of conceptualize what the tool is and how it might work, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the pedagogy, and then we'll end with a deepened demo from George. We're going to ask everyone to brainstorm a particular application that you're thinking of for one of your own classes. And then George will give us a preliminary idea of how to build, so you get a sense of how much time this would be. So let me talk a little bit about applications. So George gave a good sampling across disciplines. I'm going to give a few examples of how I've used it in my law classes. First, if I'm going to use VoiceThread in the course, I use it for class introductions at the beginning, because it's a good, safe, low stakes, no stakes way for students to get comfortable with the technology. If it doesn't work, no harm at all, but to get everyone comfortable with it. So they'll put a little video, I'll do one first, and then they'll give one back to me. They'll figure out who else is in the class. And it's a nice way to just start to build a culture, build a community that is welcoming of everyone, instead of, warmly saying hello to the 2 or 3 people you know when they enter a lecture hall. It already starts to create a strong sense of belonging where every student matters. And you can get a really nice report of who did the thing. So I usually attach like just quick participation points, and then you can see who didn't do it. So it's also really easy for attendance purposes or for tracking. It's a great tool for adversarial positions. So sometimes I'll create 2 voice threads for different positions, and then I'll ask students to post a position on a topic. So for me, it will be some sort of law debate. And then they'll have to go listen to someone else's and engage with that. So I've done that to like simulate what they might do in court. So I've had them actually argue motions, but this could work in any poli-sci, sociology, any sort of course where you want students to state and defend something, but also think more critically about the arguments and perspectives of their peers. I've also used it to engage students collaboratively. So I'll create a complex hypo. So think, for example, about like the ethics hypo that George used. So I'll do something like that, but I'll put students in teams, and then notably they have to work together to answer in an asynchronous environment. So the first person will give a little bit of the analysis, the next person will pick up. A good tool to allow students to listen to each other, to work together, and to collaboratively, in my situation, advise clients, but you could imagine doing it as like a business case or in lots of other courses. You could have them deliver a speech or deliver testimony. You could have them explain something complicated that you taught in class to a lay person. So a client's coming in to your business to explain your product, or you're defending, the engineering of your structure, defend it in this setting. And then I've also used it as a show and tell, which was especially fun over COVID. So for me, I would have students, we would do something about like product liability and product warnings, and students would find something in their house. So lots of different ways that I've used it, but if I'm going to use it, I do want to make sure I have several opportunities throughout the course for students to engage. So my sense, again, as a teacher coming into VoiceThread organically and just looking to actualize the goals of building an inclusive classroom with a strong culture of belonging, I have found VoiceThread for me to be an incredibly efficient tool, because hopefully, as George was presenting, you were seeing how you could just take an existing slide or an existing practice problem or an existing hypo and use VoiceThread as the delivery modality, but you don't need to build anything new. So it's really efficient. You could even do something as simple as in your course book on page 35, question 5, there's a practice problem. Answer it orally here. You could do something as simple as that. So you need not build anything, and you can cut and paste from prior years. So I have found it to be incredibly efficient. I've also found it to be incredibly sustainable. For me, I teach a lot of writing courses. So sitting down and looking at stacks of paper is fatiguing and exhausting. So one thing I do when I assign a VoiceThread is I'll often take a little notepad and I'll use my Canvas app on my phone, put my earbuds in, and I'll start walking, and I'll be outdoors. I'll be active, and I'll just take notes. Oh, Sarah had a really good point here. Renee made a good point here, and I'm going to emphasize that. When I go back, I'm going to give some capstone feedback, but it does also just shake up the sort of professor engagement in a way that makes me feel more fresh and more engaged. It's also more inclusive because folks can engage at their own pace. So most of the examples George showed had videos, but some you might have noticed did not have the video on. They just had the recording, the recorded voice. And there is a text option. It's pretty clunky. I don't love it, but it is helpful. An occasional student will use it, and it's fine. I wouldn't want the whole class using the text tool, because then you should be on a discussion board instead. But it's inclusive in helping students engage holistically with the material. The reason I like it particularly is it's deeply grounded in professional identity formation. So I don't want to just talk to my students about being a professional. I want to hear them do it, right? So think about all the professions where empathy, tone, context, all of those things matter. Now, instead of just writing a flat discussion board or a flat response, I can hear the empathy and the tone in their voice. So it really values a different set of communication skills and creates for some really nice modernized simulations. So before I transition back to George, I would love to get folks in the chat to maybe drop an idea. How might you use this in your field? What's something you're brainstorming that will help when George presents next to give you the most helpful feedback possible about how you could take this tool and use it? So is there a practice problem? Is there a discussion board? Is there a debate? Is there a presentation or a paper talk or anything that you could imagine in a course you already teach? So I've got a great example from Shed. Thank you for leading us off. Wonderful. So as those ideas start to come in, I hope more will come in, and George will be reading those as well. But now let's deepen. So before we got a good preview of the possibilities, and now let's imagine we are ready to actualize these pedagogical goals. And now we're going to sit down and do the work to build something on our class, on our Canvas site. Thanks, George.
All right. So VoiceThread is integrated in Canvas, and I will show you, I'll just give you a real quick run through of that. But what I always recommend is going to our workshops page. We do have free recordings that you can go check out of all of our workshops, from the basics of how to build a VoiceThread to how VoiceThread works in Canvas to various pedagogical approaches as well. And that's just at voicethread.com/workshops. But once you are on the VoiceThread homepage, I'm going to show you this first, how to create one. It's only 2 steps. You need to add your slide content and record your comments. So I'm going to go to the Create tab. All right, now let's say that you want the students, Jody had asked about the last example, kind of giving feedback on a paper. All right, so the student creates the VoiceThread the same way you would, whether you're creating a lecture, whether you want the students to create a VoiceThread for an assignment, whether you're creating a VoiceThread for a class discussion. It's always the same 2 steps. They all work the same way. You just add your media. So if I click Add Media, you'll see there are 6 different ways that I can bring slide content into the VoiceThread. I can go through my computer and upload files like images, documents, PowerPoint. I can go through the media sources, and I can connect my Google account to my VoiceThread account and import content that I have in my Google Drive. We have some other media sources as well. You can record directly from your webcam, as you saw a few examples earlier, and you can bring in YouTube videos using this URL option. You can paste a YouTube video link there, click save, and it will import that video right into VoiceThread as a video slide. All right, but I'm going to go through my computer. So if I click on my computer, let's say that maybe I teach a course on journalism. So I want to bring in some slides here. All right, they're going to start to upload and process. I give it a title. Right now, I could go into the playback options here if I want to and change some of this stuff around. As Jamie said, she doesn't like to use the text. That's kind of something that, you know, it kind of defeats the purpose of having VoiceThread, right? You want to have that human connection, but for accessibility purposes and, you know, just life situations, you might have a graduate student, if you teach grad school, who's coming home and taking the class on a noisy train and they can't really record the answers, those types of things. But in general, you're free to remove whatever you want from the comments. You can turn on comment moderation, like I mentioned earlier, the feature that makes all of the incoming comments hidden. You can do a number of different things with the playback settings. I'm not going to get into these all in detail, but you can customize the VoiceThread. All right, so I've given it a title. I click save. I have my thumbnail of my 4 slides. I can always go in to add more slides from any of these sources. And I can also rearrange the order of the slides just by dragging and dropping them where I want them. Once I'm ready to comment, I would click comment. That would open the VoiceThread up in the media player. And now I can record whatever types of comments I want to make. All right, so I removed the text option from this list, but normally you would see a text option here. There's telephone, audio, webcam, and file upload. So let's say I want to record audio. I just click on the microphone and now I'm recording. All right, the red light's blinking, the timer has started, and I see this pencil icon. This is the doodle tool that I mentioned. If you noticed, some of the instructors were writing on the slides, some of the students were writing on the slides. That's because of this doodle tool. So all you have to do is just click and drag your cursor around and you can draw freehand. All right, if I click on the pencil, I can choose different colors and decide if I want the drawing to fade or not. So I'm going to keep this set to fade and you'll see it gradually fades away, but I'm going to change to green and maybe I want to highlight this again and whatever it is that you want to annotate. When you're done, you click stop, it'll play it back and you can cancel, save, or record more. On the microphone, and now I'm recording. All right, the red light's blinking, the timer has started, and I see this pencil. All right, so I click save and my comment appears in the conversation channel next to the slide. And I can navigate to my next slide and continue to record. All right, now I do see there's some great ideas in the chat bubbling up. And I want you to keep in mind too, VoiceThread allows you to do some things that you can't do in the class, right? Which is what we talked about, the fact that it's not a serial project. It's something that, you know, everybody can participate and reflect because it's asynchronous and you can do it from a distance, but you don't have to think super creatively. You don't have to be like a genius at inventing and being innovative to use VoiceThread. You can do exactly what you do in a face-to-face class. Just lecture, discussion, probing, asking students questions. You can do all of that standard traditional pedagogy with VoiceThread. Once you get comfortable with it, now you'll start to see other applications of things that you might not be able to do, things that can expand the engagement and increase the engagement. All right, so let's see if we can bring Canvas into this quickly. All right, so you can see I'm in a Canvas course now. I want to move this chat out of the way. All right, so I'm going to give you the real short version. I know this is being recorded, so you can always watch on the recording or check out that the recording of the full workshop that we had on Tuesday. But the basics work like this. For the non-graded types of links, like a link to the VoiceThread homepage or to an individual lecture, you would go through modules. For the assignment stuff, you go through the assignment area in Canvas. All right, so let's say I wanted to add that assignment where the students had to upload a paper and I was going to give them feedback on it. what I would do is come over here to my assignment module, click on the plus sign, choose external tool, give this a name. Let's call this paper submission. Hope if I spelled that correctly. Set the points possible. Let's say this is a 20-point assignment. And then I'm going to go into more options. Right, and this is where I can find VoiceThread in the external tool list. So I'm going to look for VoiceThread here. I see it, I click on it, and it's going to bring me to the configuration menu. So here's where I decide what I want this link to do when a student clicks on it. Do I want it to open up one of the graded assignments? And all 3 of the assignments that we have connect directly to the Canvas gradebook. And then we have the non-graded stuff, like an individual voice thread. You just want to share a voice thread that's a lecture or a non-graded discussion. You just want to share it quickly and easily. You share that as an individual voice thread option. And then we have the voice thread homepage, which you can use to go and create voice threads before you're ready to share them. But for this one, I wanted this to be an assignment where the students have to create a voice thread and submit it to me. So I'm going to go through the assignment builder. And I can see the create assignment, the comment assignment, and the watch assignment. The watch assignment does not require interaction. It just checks to see whether the student has played the entire voice thread all the way through. So this is a great way to share videos and kind of take attendance. The comment assignment is what you can use for graded discussion boards or some type of quiz or test assessment, like I showed in the examples. And then finally, we have the create assignment, which is the one you would use for that use case, whether the student is making a presentation or whether they're uploading a paper for you to give feedback on, or they're going to record themselves doing an activity like that nurse practitioner student or something like that. So I'm going to choose the create assignment. I'm going to click continue. All right, now the student is going to create this voice thread, but I get to decide on their playback settings. So how many comments do they have to make in this? Well, let's say it's a minimum of 1. How many slides are required? Well, maybe I don't want any more than 10. So I can set this to be a minimum number, maximum number, or an exact number. All right, so I'm going to go with exact, and then I can once again decide which comment types would be allowed. What types of commenting do I need comment moderation on? Not for this. In this case, the students are creating the voice thread. For a quiz, I would turn on comment moderation, but for a student project, I don't want to do that. All right, and then I can decide on some other playback settings. At the very bottom, you'll see the student gallery. So let's say I want my students to submit their papers to me for a grade, or presentations or demonstrations, whatever I'm asking them to create. But I also want them to have a place to go to look at each other's and give each other peer review. I can do that by turning on the student gallery. All right, and then I click continue. I can give this a name. I can add my instructions here. I can pick a start date for when this is first available, a due date. Now the students can submit after the due date, but it will show up as submitted late. And then I can go with the close date if I want as well, decide how I want to grade this, and then publish. All right, and that brings me back to the Canvas menu where I can then select and then save and publish, and that assignment is all set. All right, so I could go into showing how the students would submit it too. That is included in that workshop. So let me just bring that link over just in case you didn't grab it before, if you wanted to check out the recording, the full recording of our workshop. But you can also, from that page, you can see the recordings of all the other workshops that we have. Jamie, all right, I want to pause here just to see, did you want to drill down on any of those sample ideas? Do you want me to talk through any of that stuff?
No, just a quick question that I got in the chat privately. So I got a feedback that someone, when they're clicking on the Canvas voice thread, they're not seeing the same options. When you were there were a couple of different options for voice thread. Is there a specific one they have to choose?
I'm not sure what it would be called at your institution. Usually it just says
Okay.
voice thread or something like that. But if you're creating a non-graded thing, like an individual voice thread or just a link to the homepage, that's created through modules. And the menus there are just a little different.
Ah.
So let me just show you the menus here. If I click on the plus sign, I have to choose external tool, and then it gives me a list. So we have a number of test, integrations here and other tools and things like that. But just look for something that says VoiceThread, click on it, and then that should bring up the configuration menu. And from there, you can select, a voice thread that you want to share. You can make any changes to the slides. You can make any changes to the comments. Make any changes to those playback settings. And then just give it a name and publish. Right. I do see Laura's idea about using VoiceThread as an alternative to message boards. Yeah, so once I discovered VoiceThread, before I started even working for the company, once I discovered VoiceThread, I stopped using those text discussions. There was always situations where people miscommunicate, right? That's one of the reasons why we use emoji in text all the time, because you're trying to let somebody know you're kidding by giving them the winky emoji or the smiley face to let them know that you're not, you're being sarcastic, you're not trying to insult somebody, right? So communicating in written text is difficult. When you can use your voice, people can hear the tone of voice, they can see your body language and the facial expressions, all of that stuff comes through, and it makes miscommunication a lot more difficult. In addition to the fact that it makes you feel like you're part of a community and you're not just, kind of part of a correspondence course from the 1980s, right?
One sort of large curricular tip, if there's something in your syllabus or your curriculum that's sort of a quick little unit and you never know where to put it, this is a great sort of snow day makeup activity or illness or conference attendance. Like if you have some sort of assignment that's already pre-built and you sort of don't know exactly when you might launch it in a particular semester, but it can be really good for something like that, like an ethics piece of your course that you want to make sure students get, but don't know quite where it goes. This can be a great sort of makeup opportunity to create a really engaging class. Jody, should I show it on my computer, George, very quickly? Would that help folks? Because I think there's just a teeny disconnect of folks who are enthusiastic about finding it, but are not getting the same visual that you are. Okay, so I'm going to try to share mine. Hold on. Is my Canvas site up now?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm on my Canvas page. I'm in a sandbox, not a real page. But I'm going to assignments. And then I'm going to create a new assignment. And under submission type, I'm going to select external tool. And then I'm going to find VoiceThread here. And it will be at the bottom, and there is only one option when and so now it's linking me out to this external tool, and then I'll need to sign in, and now I'm right where George had us before. So now I want to create, I want to build an assignment, I want to create an assignment, and now these are those options that George was showing us. All of the, okay. I think we're running out of time. Any other questions? We all want to say thank you for your engagement. There was great enthusiasm here. We're super appreciative. This is a Canvas tool, so there is institutional support for utilizing it, but VoiceThread has really helpful training materials. So I would suggest starting simple with like a slide and student engagement, and you'll gain more confidence and comfort with it. But from my perspective as an instructor, I think this is a great tool to create a learning community that's dynamic and to really incentivize all students to find their voice in your classroom. All right, I think that's a wrap. Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Victoria.
And thank you for including me in this, Jamie. It was great to hear you talk about how you structure everything, and it was great to kind of see a little more, about what you do.
No, this is great. And it was really helpful to have that huge range across the curriculum in other course settings. That music one was really interesting. So I, of course, am just stuck in like argument mode of the ways you can get students to argue together. So it's fun to see a whole range of other options. Wonderful. Thank you all for attending. Great, George. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you and work with you on this.
Yes, absolutely. And feel free to reach out if you ever have any other questions. If there's anything else you ever want to do, let us know.
I appreciate it. Take care.
All right, take care.
Victoria and Shed, do we log off? You got it.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
gonna end the recording right now.